Welcome to Permission to Breathe, a transformative podcast dedicated to providing a safe space where you can inhale deeply and exhale freely while embracing your grief journey unapologetically. I am your host, Dr. Tammy Isaac, a spiritual practitioner, grief advocate and educator, author, and your guide on this journey through grief. This space was born out of the understanding that grief is not just an event, it's a lifelong unfolding. It's layered, it's complex, and often it's silence. And here is where we disrupt the silence. We will talk about the grief that lingers after the food stops arriving at your door, the grief that remains when no one calls and no one comes by to check on you. The grief that's complicated, the grief that's ancestral, the grief that lives in your body long before it ever reaches your tears. Every episode, we honor the humanity of grief, the anger, the confusion, the numbness, the longing, and we do so without apology. Whether you're navigating fresh loss, unspoken sorrow, or the weight of a world that just won't pause, this podcast invites you to sit down, breathe deeply, and give yourself the permission you've been waiting for to grieve, to feel, to breathe. Let's begin. Are you grieving and feel like you're struggling alone? You don't have to walk this path by yourself. Book a virtual session with Dr. Tammy Isaac at Breathe Grief Counseling Center. Visit us online at www.breathegriefcounselingcenter.com. Dr. Isaac will help you put your emotions into words. She'll help you reduce the feeling of isolation. She'll help you understand that everyone grieves differently and also help you prevent unhealthy coping mechanisms. Take control of your life with world-class counseling sessions today with Dr. Tammy Isaac. Today, we're entering into a sacred space, one that far too many mothers occupy in silence. Today, we're talking about grief in the postpartum journey. When people speak about emotions after birth, the conversation often centers around postpartum depression. And yes, that's real, serious, and it deserves attention. But what we don't talk about enough is postpartum grief. Postpartum grief isn't a diagnosis, it's a response. It's the sorrow that surfaces when your sense of self feels distant or missing. It's mourning the life you knew before motherhood. It's grieving an imagined birth story that never actually happened. It's the weight of silence around that. And while grief and depression can feel similar, they're not the same. Grief is a natural emotional reaction to loss. It moves like a tide, right? Depression is a clinical condition that persists and often requires therapeutic or medical support. So in this episode, we'll unpack these differences, explore how they sometimes overlap, and hold space for anyone navigating these emotional undercurrents. Whether you're quietly grieving in the middle of the night or feeling guilty for not feeling how you thought you should, I want you to know you're not broken. You're not alone. I want you to take a deep breath and inhale with me. Exhale. Inhale grace, exhale shame, and let's begin. So let's start by naming what often goes unnamed, which is postpartum grief. Postpartum grief is the quiet mourning that follows the birth of a child or even the end of a pregnancy. It's not the same as postpartum depression, and it's not always rooted in tragedy. Sometimes grief comes not because something went wrong, but because something is simply different. You can grieve the version of yourself you used to be. You can grieve the spontaneity you once had. And you can grieve your body, your energy, your sleep, your independence. And if your experience included a traumatic birth, an unexpected NICU stay for the baby, a miscarriage, stillbirth, or any medical complications, you might be grieving the entire narrative that you actually had envisioned. Now, society tells us that birth is supposed to be a joyful time, and for many it is. But when you're grieving, that culture expectation can feel like pressure, like you're falling or failing at something sacred because you're not smiling all the way through the experience. But I want you to hear me clearly. Grief is not the absence of love. You can love your child and still grieve deeply. You can feel gratitude and sadness in the same breath. You can show up for your baby while still trying to find your way back to yourself. That is the complexity and the beauty of postpartum grief. It's layered, it's sacred, it's real. And when we don't talk about it, women tend to suffer in silence, thinking they're the only ones crying in the bathroom, the only ones feeling numb in the nursery, the only ones quietly asking, what's wrong with me? But actually, there's nothing wrong with you. Your soul is simply adjusting to the shift that has taken place in your life, that now you are a mother and now you have these new responsibilities, or this heavy weight of responsibility upon your life, caring for another life. One of the things that I have always thought about as a younger person growing up is, what would I do becoming a mother? Like, how would I be as a mother? Like, am I responsible enough? Do I have what it takes to be able to nurture a child into this life? And it's been one of the things that I always have concerned myself about. Obviously now I don't have kids, but that was just something I always thought about. And so that can also be a weight for people who have had children, and now you come into the reality, like, this is real. Like, for some people, it doesn't actually become real until after they've had the baby, or they are being discharged and have to go home and now face the reality of, like, I'm a mother and I'm happy about that, but I'm also afraid or feeling a bit weary within my spirit and my soul about the responsibility and the change and the trajectory of what my life is now going to look like. Now, as being a chaplain, one of the things that I often see and experience with new mothers is when the birth doesn't go the way that they expected. You know, sometimes they want to be able to do it without the epidural. Sometimes they want to be able to give a natural birth and they don't want to have a C-section, but things go awry and there's no choice but to do it a different way from the way that they expected. And so those things can also weigh very heavy on them. So it's so many different challenges and experiences and expectations around motherhood that can really cause women to find themselves in a bit of postpartum grief. But I want you to know that, you know, if no one has told you this before, I want you to know that you are allowed to grieve what you lost, while still also embracing what you gained. Your expectations, there's a lot of things that we expect out of life that doesn't necessarily happen the way that we want them to or look the way we want them to, but that doesn't mean that we don't end up having a beautiful life. Let's talk about the space between postpartum grief and postpartum depression, how they overlap. Now, the truth is they can feel very similar. Both can bring tears, both can feel heavy, both can leave you wondering if you're okay. But there's an important distinction between the two. Now, postpartum grief is a natural emotional response to loss, whether it's the loss of identity, independence, expectations, or even the loss of a child. It's raw, but it tends to come in waves. There may be good days and hard days. You might feel deeply sad in one moment and peaceful or joyful in another. On the other hand, postpartum depression is a clinical condition and it lingers. It persists. It disrupts your ability to function, bond, or care for yourself or your baby. And here's where it gets tricky. Sometimes grief can become depression if it goes unsupported. That's why naming grief matters. That's why sacred space like this conversation matters. So, how can we tell the difference? If what you're feeling is consistent hopelessness, loss of interest in things you once enjoyed, persistent fatigue beyond the physical demands of motherhood, trouble bonding with your baby, feelings of worthlessness, guilt, or despair, or thoughts of self-harm or harming your baby, then what you're experiencing may be more than grief. And I lovingly urge you, please seek professional support. Postpartum depression is not your fault. It is not a moral failing. It's a mental health condition, and healing is possible. Okay? Now, if what you're feeling is more like mourning your old life, tearfulness triggered by specific moments or memories, sadness that comes and goes, feeling off but still connected to yourself and your baby at times, then you may be grieving. And that grief deserves space as well. It deserves care and it deserves the validation. What I want you to hear is this. Postpartum grief and postpartum depression deserve compassion. They both do, because both are real, both are valid, and you don't have to navigate either one of them alone. So it's important that you talk to someone. It could be a counselor, a doctor, a chaplain, a friend, because the act of speaking what hurt is often the first step toward healing. When people hear the word loss after birth, they often assume it means the loss of a baby. And yes, that grief is profound and sacred, but there are many forms of postpartum loss that go unnamed and ungrieved because they don't look like what we traditionally defined as grief. So let's name them. There is the loss of identity. So this is when the version of you before motherhood feels like a stranger. The loss of freedom, when your time, your sleep, your schedule no longer belong to you. There is the loss of intimacy, when physical recovery, exhaustion, or emotional distance make connection with your partner feel impossible. There's the loss of community, when friendship shifts, invitations stop, and your world feels smaller. There is the loss of expectations, when the birth didn't go as planned or your emotions don't match the narrative you were told to expect. There is also the loss of your body as you knew it. So when mirrors start to reflect unfamiliar shapes and scars and soreness, you start to experience this loss. And even more quietly, there is this loss of peace after a traumatic delivery, the loss of confidence when feeding or soothing doesn't come easily, and the loss of your voice when no one asks, how are you? Because everybody's just wooing over the baby. These are the losses, and there are, of course, many more that don't come with casseroles and sympathy cards, but they still do matter. And they also deserve to be acknowledged, because grief isn't always tied to death. It's tied to change. And the postpartum season is full of change. Emotionally, physical, relational, and spiritual change. When we don't name these losses, women start to believe they're being dramatic, ungrateful, or weak. But naming is powerful. Naming validates. Naming opens the door for your healing. So, if you're feeling something you can't quite put into words, maybe it's grief. Maybe it's your soul saying something is gone, even though something beautiful has arrived. Both can be true, and you are not wrong for feeling both. One of the heaviest parts of postpartum grief is not just what you feel, it's what you believe you're supposed to feel. From the moment you announce a pregnancy, people begin projecting joy onto your journey. You're told to enjoy every moment, to be thankful, to soak up the newborn snuggles. And while those things can be true, they can also be incomplete. Because what often goes unspoken is the pressure to bounce back, the pressure to bond instantly, the pressure to breastfeed effortlessly, the pressure to post glowing photos with matching swaddles and heartfelt captions while privately you're asking, who am I? We don't often talk about how motherhood can crack your identity wide open, about how many women silently grieve their autonomy, their routine, their relationship dynamics, even their sense of beauty or confidence. And the grief deepens when people around you dismiss it. At least the baby's healthy. This is what you pray for. You'll just get tired. It'll pass. No, you're just tired. It'll pass. These well-meaning phrases can invalidate the very real experience of a woman navigating a life shift. Motherhood is sacred, yes, but it is also stretching and breaking and becoming. I want to remind every mother listening, you are not failing if you're grieving. Grief doesn't mean you don't love your baby. It doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It means something has changed and your soul is catching up. So you're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to be unsure. You're allowed to say, this is harder than I thought. Because God doesn't demand your perfection. He welcomes your truth. And in that truth, in that honesty is where healing actually begins. So release the pressure to perform. You're not here to meet someone else's script of motherhood. You're actually here to walk out your own story with breath, with grace, and yes, even with grief. Postpartum grief doesn't just affect your body or your mind. It can also shake the foundation of your spirit. You may find yourself wondering, where is God in all of this? Or maybe you're too exhausted to even pray about it. I've met women who whisper, I feel guilty because I prayed for this baby and now I feel like I'm drowning. And others who silently wonder why God allowed a traumatic birth or a stillbirth, or why they feel so far from the joy that they were promised or expected. Now, let me say this. Grief does not mean that you've lost your faith. And I know that's a big thing within the spiritual community. It may just mean your soul is searching for God in a new way through the fog of tears and tangled up emotions. It's you seeing God from a different experience or perspective, you getting to know him in a way that you have not gotten to know him, and be able to receive from him in a way that you haven't. It could be many of those things. Postpartum grief can really make you feel disconnected, not only from others, but from yourself, from God, from the parts of you that once felt completely anchored in life, anchored in what you believed, anchored in your joy and in your happiness. You may feel isolated even in a house full of people, and you may feel unseen even when you're holding a new life. And that emotional weight, when you layer hormonal changes, sleep deprivation, physical recovery, and emotional exhaustion, it can feel crushing. But in the quiet corners of your grief, there is still sacredness. There is still presence. I believe God is not absent in this grief. He's sitting with you in it, not rushing you, not asking you to bounce back, not waiting for you to pray louder or be stronger. He's just sitting with you. in the way that I wish many people would just sit with us in our grief instead of rushing us through the process to get over our experiences, to process faster than we can even understand what has actually happened in our lives. Now, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is just be honest to say, God, I don't know how to do this. God, I'm hurting. I feel disconnected or I need help. And that's not weakness. That's the intimacy and the vulnerability that you have with God. And I really wish that we could really have with one another. Because God is not afraid of your grief. He is not intimidated by your questions. He is, according to scripture, near to the brokenhearted. And that includes mothers breaking under the weight of this invisible sorrow. So if this is you, I want you to know your soul is not lost. It's just tender right now. It's being reshaped by something life altering. And that reshaping literally takes time and compassion and honesty. So now I want to give grieving mothers that are navigating through postpartum grief some coping strategies, not for surviving in silence, but creating safe space to breathe, to process, and to heal as you walk through your postpartum grief. Now, these strategies aren't about rushing your healing. They are about reminding you that you matter in this new and unfamiliar season. Okay. So the first thing I want to share with you is to give yourself permission to grieve. Start by telling yourself the truth. I'm allowed to miss my old life. I'm allowed to feel overwhelmed, and I'm allowed not to have it all together, because grief doesn't mean you're failing. It literally means that you're feeling. Okay. The second thing I want you to do is let go of perfection. The perfect mother does not exist, and neither does the perfect postpartum experience. Release the curated stories from social media and embrace your reality and honor it as being sacred. Okay. The third thing is find one safe space to talk. So whether it is a counselor, a chaplain, a support group, or a trusted friend, your grief needs a place to be heard and not judged. Saying it out loud can really loosen the weight that you are carrying in this season. The fourth thing I want you to do is to care for your body gently. Your body is in recovery, not just physically, but also emotionally and harmonially. Sleep when you can. Nourish yourself. Hydrate. Move gently if it feels good, and rest without guilt. Now, that's a big one, right? And the last thing I want to share is, well, not the last thing, but the next thing is write your way through it. So some people like journaling. So you can journal, and it can help you process the swirl of emotions, and you can use some prompts. I like to give prompts too. So I'll give you 3 prompts. What do I miss about who I was before? You can write about that. You can also write about what has surprised me the most about motherhood. And then the third thing you can write about is, where do I feel God showing up even in small places? So these are things that you can use as journal prompts, and you can start writing within a journal. Get you a cute little notebook. I love those notebooks. I'm always at Burlington's or Ross or somewhere that always have like journals and notebooks. They're just so cute. And you can start writing in them and using these prompts. And even any questions or concerns that pop up in your head, you can also use as a prompt and write it down. Okay, number 6, create rituals for what was lost. So a lot of people find it very comforting to do different type of rituals. So if you feel like there's one that is helpful and you feel good about doing it, then you should. And so some of those rituals are like, and it can be anything, because these are things like you come up that are connected somehow emotionally, personally to what you've lost, right? So you can light a candle for the version of yourself that you missed. You can create a playlist that lets your tears flow, or even a playlist that used to be your jam, like back in the day when you used to dance and have a good time with your girlfriends, right? You could have just a day of rest with no obligations. Like, this will be my rest day. Like, sometimes in work, I have certain days that I'm going to do certain things. So I have a day that I just started doing called Project Day. That will be the day that I only work on projects versus doing other little things. So you could have no obligation day, right? That is the day that I am simply going to rest, give everybody else responsibilities that they need to take care of while I rest today. And then sometimes spiritual healing comes through just small intentional acts. So just something being intentional about um, your experience that will bring you some type of relief. You should really think about doing. And the last thing, number 7, is the easiest one, is breathe. Literally, just breathe. When the heaviness starts to step in and you feel anxious and overwhelmed, just stop, take deep breaths, slow, deep breaths. Inhale peace and you exhale all of the stress, all of the pressure that you're feeling. Even 1 minute of intentional breathing can really ground your nervous system and remind your body, I am safe and I am still here, right? So every month when I send out my Breathe newsletter, so if you're not signed up for that, please go to my website and sign up for the newsletter, www.drtammyisaac.com. And every month when I send out the newsletter, at the beginning of the newsletter, before you get into reading anything else that's going on, there is always a breathing exercise that I put in there. Sometimes it's deep belly breathing. There's breathing for your nervous system, breathing for anxiety. There are different types of breathing exercises that I put in, and usually there's a video to help walk you through it. So it's very important that we do this breathing because it really grounds us and help us to settle. So when you are familiar with different types of breathing and how important it is, when you find yourself overwhelmed, you can be reminded, okay, let me breathe, right? So that's one of the main reasons why my business is called Breathe, because a lot of times when we get overwhelmed by something, we stop breathing, right? Because we're so shocked. And people have to tell you, calm down, breathe, 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 right? We forget to breathe. We forget to exist. We forget to continue living because we are still yet in this life, okay? Let me also say, coping doesn't mean that you're pretending. It means tending to your heart, tending to your pain, and tending to your new beginning. So if today you don't feel strong, I want you to know that's okay. You don't have to be strong to be whole. You just have to be honest and willing to take the next breath. If you're listening today and thinking, this isn't my story, but it's someone I love, then thank you. Because your presence, your awareness can be life-changing. Supporting a mother who's grieving in the postpartum season requires more than advice or just well wishes. It requires presence, patience, and permission. So let's talk about how to show up in a way that truly supports. Ask how she's doing and really mean it. Don't just ask about the baby. Ask how she is. And if she hesitates or says, I'm fine, gently say, it's okay if you're not. 2, don't rush her emotions. You may want to cheer her up or distract her, but healing isn't linear and joy can't be forced. Instead of trying to fix it, say something like, this is hard and I'm here for you. Number 3, we can offer practical help. So you can drop off a meal, fold a blanket, a laundry, hold the baby so she can shower, ask what's needed and listen and move forward from there based on their comments afterwards. Definitely avoid cliches. We always say this, especially when it comes to grief. Comments like, at least the baby is healthy, or everything happens for a reason, can unintentionally minimize their pain. Okay. So instead, try saying something like, I can't imagine how you're feeling, but I care deeply. Okay. Number 5, let's normalize grief in the postpartum season. Okay. Let her know she's not broken. She's not failing. She's just navigating a major transition, and grief is a part of that transition. Number 6, encourage professional support if needed. Gently ask if she's spoken to a doctor or a therapist, right? Be gentle with this question. You can say something like, would you be open to talking to someone? There's no shame in seeking help. You deserve that support. You say things like that. So, but you definitely have to be gentle when you're asking that question, especially within the BIPOC community. Number 7, show up again and again. Don't check in just once, right? Grief doesn't follow a calendar. So continue to check in and check on her, a week at a time, 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months. Hey, keep checking in. And also know that sometimes the greatest ministry is simply staying when everyone else has literally moved on. What I have learned through my own experience and the experiences of others in grief is that many people will come and support, but the ones that the griever remembers are usually the ones who stayed and linger when everything else was gone and everybody moved on. Okay. I also want you to know that your presence can be the thing that helps a mother begin to breathe again, not because you solved anything, but because you stayed close enough to remind her that she is seen and that she's not alone and that she is absolutely worthy of care. To the mother listening right now, wherever you are, however you're feeling, I want you to know this. You are not alone. If today you're grieving, aching, or wondering who you've become in the aftermath of birth, your pain is not invisible to God. You may not feel the version of you once knew. You may be carrying silent sadness in your arms while the world expects you to smile. But you are still here. You are still worthy. You are still holy ground. This grief you're carrying is not weakness. It's love trying to find its way through change. I pray that as you navigate this unfamiliar landscape, you give yourself permission to slow down, to cry, to feel joy, to feel nothing, and to feel everything. And I pray that you encounter the nearness of God, not just in the miraculous parts of motherhood, but in the messy middle, in the unraveling, in the tears you cry when no one's watching. May your breath become your prayer. May your softness become your strength. And may you remember that healing doesn't happen by hiding your grief, but by honoring it. No, you are not behind. You are becoming. And for every part of you that feels lost right now, there is grace. This is your journey, and this is your permission to breathe. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Permission to Breathe podcast. I hope today created space for you to breathe and find peace on your journey. I invite you to join me again next Monday for another episode as we continue to navigate this path together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share the podcast. Until next time, take care and keep breathing unapologetically.